the most underappreciated players in the SEC going into 2024. Like, imagine you're at a bar just talking with your buddies and you start bringing up players in the SEC. Most are going to know who Jalen Milroe is or Carson Beck is, or you could even go a little bit deeper with Luther Burden or even Nick Scorton at Texas A&M. But what about those flying under the radar? And I'm not talking about names that potentially we've mentioned on the show. I'm saying let's go to Mariana's Trench level deep. Because at the end of the day, several of these players might be a reason why these teams are actually over-exceeding expectations going into 2024. But what's going on, SEC Unfiltered? It's Cole Thompson here. Make sure that you like the video. Hit the ring notification down below. That way you don't miss a single episode of SECU, because we're talking college football every single day leading up to week 1. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Make sure that you're also following us on all the social channels: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. If I missed a player and you want to yell at me in the comment section or on social media, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson. And to keep up with the #1 content surrounding your favorite conference, visit SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by Roback. Use promo code SECU for 20% off all joggers, polos, hoodies, shorts, much, much more. Promo code SECU. Look good, feel good this upcoming fall at Roback.com. We're going to start off at quarterback and work our way down. We got about 13 players. I'm going to try to spend as much time on each as possible without boring you to death. For starters, it's Connor Weigman at Texas A&M. There's many people in the NFL world who are saying this might end up being QB1 for the 2025 draft. And you're talking to yourself and going, well, how is that possible? He's barely played 4 games last year. You're right. He did play 4 games last year. And he also played in 4 games the year prior where he had 8 touchdown passes, 0 turnovers, and looked to be the future of Texas A&M's offense. In fact, if you look at his numbers through the last 2 seasons, he has been about as perfect as you want for a quarterback. 16 touchdowns against 2 interceptions, completion percentage roughly around 63%, over 2,000 passing yards. He's got the enigma, the touch, the accuracy, and the poise to deliver every pass downfield. But then we hear the argument that he is injury prone. I'm going to stop you. No, he is not. He's had 1 injury since high school. 1 major injury that kept him out last year, and apparently now he is just basically on crutches, hoping that the Grim Reaper won't take away his career. There's a lot to like about number 15's game. There's a reason why Mike Elko came on in and said, nope, he's QB1 immediately. The big question is going to be, will he fit for this brand of offense that Colin Klein wants to run with the mobile quarterback? And if so, well, we're talking about a guy that probably elevates your team from probably being in that conversation of 7 wins to maybe 9 wins. There's reasons to believe that with the accuracy, the arm strength, and the way he's been able to build relationships with the receivers, Texas A&M's going to score a lot of points, in large part due to Weigman. And Diego Pavia is another name I want you to remember. And you probably say to yourself, who is that guy? The Vanderbilt quarterback. Okay, well, now you probably already tuned out. Stay with me for a minute. Pavia beat Auburn last year. Yeah, he was the guy at New Mexico State that marched on into Jordan-Hare Stadium and absolutely delivered a bloodbath of a performance. And he was a big reason why they won. He had 3 touchdown passes. He had another rushing touchdown. He finished with like 241 yards. Completion percentage roughly around, I think, 68%. And he's balled out the last 2 years at New Mexico State with Tim Beck. And many of you are probably saying, why is Tim Beck being brought up? Because he's the offensive coordinator at Vanderbilt, and the big reason why Pavia is there. And so now you look at what he's been able to do as a mobile player. He's had 9 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 years. I think it's actually 10. On top of that, he's also been a very dynamic passer. His completion percentage hovers roughly around 62%. I'm not saying Vanderbilt's going to be a good team. In fact, I would say almost nobody's going to say Vanderbilt's going to be a good team. It's freaking Vanderbilt. We all know what they are. They're the doormat of the SEC. It happened for a minute. But maybe you do get an upset win because of who you have at QB. I'm just saying sometimes having the right play caller and the right passer project great numbers. Same thing goes for running back. Henry Parrish Jr. is a name that many people probably forgot about in the SEC. But you shouldn't, because he was a baller during his first 2 years as the RB3 at Ole Miss. And he already has a good relationship with Kevin Smith, the running backs coach, because he was recruited by Smith to go to Miami. And he already has a good relationship with Lane Kiffin. Last season in Coral Gables, he finished with 6 rushing touchdowns. He averaged over 5.7 yards per play. On top of that, he was the lead running back for most of the year on what seemed to be a very underwhelming Miami offense. Somebody's got to step up as the running back number one. Right now, it feels like Ulysses Bentley, after what he's done for the program the last few years, is probably going to be the go-to guy down in Oxford. But make no mistake, Henry Parrish has a great relationship with the running backs coach. He has a great understanding of what Lane Kiffin's offense is, and they love to utilize the running back room. The thing that people are going to be saying is, why is Jackson Dart not throwing the football more? Largely, it's probably due to the fact they have a very good ground game that they're able to trust and probably carry the load a bit more than you think. Let's also talk about Jaydon Blue, another running back by committee backfield in the University of Texas. CJ Baxter was a human highlight reel when on the field last year. And a lot of people do believe he can be one of, if not the best running backs in the SEC. The second he touches down week one against, I think it's Louisiana Monroe. Strike that. Reverse it. I have no idea who they play. Actually, it's Colorado State. There we go. Knew it was going to come back to me at some point. But Jaydon Blue, you got to remember that last season, he also saw significant action. 6.1 yards per play, 3 rushing touchdowns. He's a junior out of Houston, 398 rushing yards. They like to have a change of pace running back room. They like to have that power and that elusiveness. Which version are you going to get of Blue? Is Baxter going to be the elusiveness and you get the power from Blue? Are you going to see him be very effective on third down inside the red zone? Roschon Johnson may not have been the household name by many in the Big 12, but those who were in Austin respected him at a high-end level. That's kind of the way I feel about Blue. He's going to be a figure that people are going to remember in Austin for his success inside the red zone, and because he's got a little bit of breakaway speed. Do not look now, but even though I do think Baxter will be the 1,000-yard runner, you are going to see double the production from Blue in 2024. At wide receiver, the first name that I want to bring up is actually somebody from the likes of Auburn. And it's not Cam Coleman. And it's not Keandre Lambert-Smith. It's Robert Smith. Robert Lewis, my apologies. The Georgia State transfer. So at Georgia State last year, he had 7 touchdowns. He averaged like 14.2 yards per play. He's a 5'10" receiver that probably is going to be used at his best in the slot. You've seen the consistency of what he can do with a quarterback that actually knows how to pass under pressure. So last year, Georgia State's offensive line was abysmal. So they had a quarterback that was always on the move. Lewis was one of those dudes who ended up standing out alongside Marcus Carroll, which is why the SEC came calling and said, here, do you want to play for us? And he's got back-to-back years of over 400 receiving yards in production. So there's a lot to like about him and what he brings to the table. I think that when you look at Cam Coleman, people are going to say, we have to make sure that he's not pressured immediately. And I would understand that. And I would understand you also saying that, okay, we probably got to turn to a guy such as Keandre Lambert-Smith. But what if you also turn to Robert Lewis, to where Perry Thompson doesn't have to come out immediately and be that go-to receiver on the outside? What if you talk about a guy potentially like, I don't know, how about a Rivaldo Fairweather, where he gets to be just another name, a part of the pack? I like what you have in Robert Lewis. I think that he could be a very sound playmaker by the season's end, and Peyton Thorne may need him as to be the number one receiver if he's under pressure. Another name that we got to talk about, how about Trey Wilson or Eugene Wilson? So when we did the preseason rankings for the first team and second team offense, I kind of understood that you probably weren't going to get Trey onto the board. But that does not mean by the season's end he won't be there. Ricky Pearsall's gone. You still have to hope that Graham Mertz builds that same relationship that he had in Madison with Shamir DK. And Elijah Badger's got pure speed, but there's something about having consistency with a player that you already know. That's where Trey Wilson steps up. Last year, he averaged over 8.9 yards per play, 530 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. He's kind of a gadget-type player. Number 3 was able to cook his way throughout the ins and outs of the middle of the field. He's a good route runner. He's got everything that you want in terms of being a superstar playmaker. And there's something about Florida wide receivers that every few years, they just find a way to take over games. And this is where I feel like Trey Wilson is going to be that guy. He's got great speed in the open field. He knows how to change direction. He already has a great relationship with Graham Mertz. How do you not view him as potentially one of those superstar playmakers? And again, I'm not saying that he immediately comes out and flourishes and leads Florida to, I don't know, what we're saying, 9 wins. What I am saying is there's a lot to like about him as a playmaker overall. And the same thing goes for Matthew Golden at Texas. So the Longhorns added in Silas Bolden this offseason, Isaiah Bond from Alabama, Amari Nyblack. They still have Jonte Cook. They bring in Ryan Wingo, the 5-star phenom from Missouri. But Matthew Golden was an all Big 12 player. Like, you realize that. At one point, he was viewed as the top target for the Houston Cougars. In 2022, he had 7 touchdowns. In 2023, he had 6 touchdowns. For his career, he's averaged 14.2 yards per play, and he offers incredible value on special teams. So you're missing an Adonai Mitchell. You're missing a Jordan Whittington. You're missing a Xavier Worthy. Somebody has got to step up into those 3 roles. Maybe Golden may not be the household name that people thought when he initially signed, because everyone else has slowly come on in and been able to build their own branding. But I do think Matthew Golden is going to have a pretty big part of this offense in the not so distant future. At tight end, these are 2 very easy ones for me. Brett Norfleet is going to be, I think, phenomenal. When you're 6'7", you are a red zone nightmare. And Brady Cook's going to have his option to play with that wide receiver, whether it be Mookie Cooper, whether it be Luther Burden, whether it be Theo Wease. He's got 2 great running backs in Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. But, like, if you're a good route runner at that size, and Norfleet is, it's just a mismatch nightmare. Safeties can't cover you because they're too small to be able to knock the ball out of your hands. Linebackers can't cover you because of, even though they have the size, they don't have the speed to keep up with you. So Norfleet is probably going to be a dude that finishes with maybe like 265 receiving yards, but that doesn't mean he is going to be somebody that you want to mess with. He may finish with 7 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns. They all come inside within the 20, but at the same time, if you're scoring a lot of points in Kirby Moore's system, you're putting yourself in a prime position to be picked to go to the college football playoff. Ben Yurosek is probably the most underappreciated player that joined the SEC this offseason. I would say probably Robert Lewis is close behind, but when I look at Yurosek and what he did during his time at Stanford, good God. Like, go do yourself a favor at 2 a.m. when you can't fall asleep. Watch highlight reels of what was going on in Palo Alto last year, and really the last 2 years. He's 6'4". He's a great route runner, smooth, silky hands, does not drop many passes. And he was playing in a system that basically was waving the white flag in the 4th quarter, yet he was the brightest star. Like, every single time he touched the football, there was magic. You're not replacing Brock Bowers. It's impossible to replace what the personification and, more importantly, the impact of what number 19 did. But Yurek's a pretty good consolation prize. In fact, I would say it's probably the best consolation prize you can add. Plus, you bring in Oscar Delp and Dylan Bell. You got a tight end room that's going to be able to work with you in your favor. And another one when it comes to offensive line, I got 3 guys really fast. Jake Majors at the University of Texas. People focus so much in on what is the offensive identity. And I agree, it's very important. But every quarterback that's a veteran will benefit from having a veteran center that knows how to set the line. Jake Majors has started over 39 games in a row during his time on the 40 acres. And now he's going into his senior year. He has been tasked with working with a multitude of quarterbacks, having them all on the same page. And he's been the anchor of the offensive line down in Austin. An offensive line that's good enough to win in the SEC. I think that he is going to flourish right away. I think Percy Lewis, who goes on over from Mississippi State to Auburn, is really going to do a great job of stabilizing that left side of the offensive line. So last year for the Bulldogs, I think he only gave up 2 sacks. He had 4 hurries. He had 2 penalties against his name. And in the biggest games against Georgia, against Alabama, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was the game against California, he did not allow a sack or a pressure. So Peyton Thorne was upright in every single one of those games. My bad. Strike that. Not against those teams. It was against Alabama, it was against Texas A&M, and it was against Ole Miss at Mississippi State. My apologies. Will Rogers was not touched one time during those games. He comes on over from the Mississippi Community College, so they had 2 years of reps. I think when you put him on the blind side, it allows you to have a little bit more of a good run game. He was actually one of the best run blocking offensive tackles, according to Pro Football Focus, in the SEC last year in Starkville. You have a good running back in Jarquez Hunter. You want to use him properly, that's the guy that you want to turn to. And lastly, when it comes to the offensive line, my bad, defensive line, Tonka Hemmingway, South Carolina. So South Carolina has some really, really talented playmakers, especially on the defensive side. Debo Williams is probably the one that most people turn to. But did you know that Tonka Hemmingway finished top 5 last year in pass breakups with 7 at the line of scrimmage? So he just gets up in your face, bull rushes you, pulls you down, and is able to swat the football with ease to make it look easy for you. So he's going to force a lot of 3-and-outs for the Gamecocks defense. He's going to get the ball right back in Lenore Sellers' hands. He may end up being a name that we talk about as one of the most underappreciated players in South Carolina history. He's only building off of last season. I think Hemmingway's in for a massive year. I think another guy that's in for a massive year, another player joining from the Big 12, Ethan Downs, Oklahoma. So this is the leader in sacks right now for the Sooners, 9.5 over the last 2 years. He stepped up big in multiple games, including Red River. And I think that that's going to translate. He is one of those playmakers that maybe doesn't win with just pure size, even though he's really big at 6'4", but he's got the athleticism to where if an offensive tackle is leaning a little bit too much forward, you're able to utilize that to your advantage to shift outside or shift inside, catch them off balance, and go untouched into the backfield. There is a very big emphasis right now on who is going to be the breakout pass rusher. James Pierce, of course, is going to be the favorite because of what he did last season at Tennessee. But after him, there's question marks. Is it going to be Trey Moore? Is it going to be Nick Scorton? We don't talk about those players and leave out Ethan Downs' name. But apparently we do. I think that he's in for a monumental year in Norman. Linebacker, Tauren York is going to be an all-SEC linebacker by the season's end. I am going to firmly write down right here, right now, plant the flag, and say Tauren York is going to be potentially an All-American this offseason. So if you don't know much about Tauren York, he was a late addition to Texas A&M's recruiting class in 2023. But before that, he was committed to Duke. He was going to go play for Mike Elko. So he already has an understanding about what Elko wants. And in the SEC, as an undersized linebacker last year, dude balled out, finished second in tackles. He also finished third in tackles for losses. He had a couple of big pass breakups. He's pretty fluid in coverage. He's not afraid of contact whatsoever. And that low center of gravity, people say short kings have some issues. They also have some strengths, like being able to hoist you up over your head and flip you backwards and make you pay. That's what Tauren York is going to do on the regular and College Station this upcoming fall. I love his tape. I love his film. I love his tenacity. And he's already earned the respect as a freshman to garner that captain's badge. I think that he is in for a massive, massive year for the likes of the Aggies. And in the other UT, Knoxville, Jeremiah Telander. Has anybody really talked about him much? No, we've talked about Pilly. But you do realize that he's coming off of injury. He's going to be a transfer going into his 6th year. From what I've seen in very little terms of Telander, this might be the linebacker that we should be talking about. Last season, I think he had 30 tackles. He also had 6 tackles in his final 5 games. 6 tackles per game in his final 5 games. He's pretty well balanced. They have him listed, I think, as the Mike linebacker. He can play both Mike and Will. So there's going to be formations to where the 2 linebacker sets have to both swell. You need somebody to step up in place of Elijah Herring. He's gone. He's now at Memphis. He's trying to get the Tigers to a college football playoff appearance. Now, potentially, we're going to see the likes of whoever is that linebacker to take over. I think Telander can be that in Knoxville. At cornerback, I go Isaiah Hamilton. So I've been able to watch Isaiah Hamilton in person for years, living in the great state of Texas and in the city of Houston. Because if he played at Texas Southern, which is a HBCU school in the city of Houston, and then he played at the University of Houston. And let me tell you, Ole Miss fans, kid balled out. Everywhere he was, he balled out. He had 11 interceptions in 3 years between the Tigers and the Cougars. He also had 11 pass breakups. He's 6'1". He's not afraid of contact. He's able to make a ton of plays in coverage. He's able to also play and be willing to play the run. You get a guy like that to go up against, say, I don't know. How about CJ Daniels from LSU? Or how about this? How about Nick Anderson at Oklahoma? Because he will. Or how about Dominic Lovett at Georgia? Because he will. And you shut them down per game. Well, there are other weapons for the Tigers and for the Sooners and for the Bulldogs, but those are probably the top targets that you're going to be seeing on Saturdays this year. So what if Isaiah Hamilton comes on in and immediately puts them in their place? I'm very high on him because of what I've seen during his time when he was at the University of Houston. I think he is in for a monumental year. At safety, go back to the Plains, Jerrin Thompson. needs to be a name that gets brought up more. So he's already started for 2 straight years during his time at the University of Texas. It was time for him to move on. He wasn't ready to go to the NFL. So now he goes and he joins DJ Durkin's defensive backfield. 7 pass breakups last year, 6 interceptions in the last 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. Also keep in mind, he's had 15 pass breakups during that same span. He had 3 interceptions last season and was a part of a defense that turned the corner and was able to lead their team to a Big 12 finish. First time since 2009. You get a guy that can make plays, is able to stay toe-to-toe with wide receivers, is able to go ahead and force an incompletion or at best an interception for a turnover, get the ball back to your offense. You're in a very, very, very good spot. I like Jerrin Thompson to be the leader and the enforcer of a secondary that's losing pieces like Naheem Pritchett, that's losing pieces for the last 2 years on all levels of the field. I like what I've seen from him during his tenure on the 40 acres. I think it will translate to the Plains with ease. And lastly, I'm going to go back to Norman, Oklahoma. There was a 5-star phenom that absolutely impressed me during his entire high school recruiting process. And now he gets to go play in the SEC. It's Peyton Bowen. Peyton Bowen will be the replacement for Billy Bowman in terms of enforcer for the secondary. But last year, you had to be impressed with what you saw. 5 pass breakups, 30 tackles. I think he had a couple tackles for losses. He also got his hands on the football, nearly got an interception at times. He was a consistent tackler in space. I think that now losing Key Lawrence to Ole Miss, it opens up more playing time for him. And I won't be shocked if he ends up being one of the biggest and brightest stars for the Sooners defense this year. Whether or not you want to admit it, this is a damn good defense for Oklahoma. And it's because of who is at the helm leading the charge. What was one thing that we knew about Brent Venables during his time when he was at Clemson? He knew how to scout defensive backs. There are a ton that are currently playing in the NFL because of him. Look no further than Peyton Bowen to be one of those next guys. But let me know in the comment section down below. Who did I miss as the underrated players going into 2024? Was I right on a certain player? Was there a player that you want me to mention next time in a video? Do you want me to continue to do these type of series moving forward? Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you're also following us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. If you want to yell at me for not naming your favorite player, at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter, and to keep up with the #1 source for all things SEC, make sure you visit SECunfiltered.com. I'm Cole Thompson. Until next time, folks. Later.